Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Zareen Poonen-Levine. I'm part of the Department of Technology as a Personalized Learning Environments Program Manager. We also have Devora Merling here. She's going to be our moderator today. She's also part of the Digital Learning team, Department of Technology. We're so excited to have you all here today. This is a little bit different format for us. A lot of these sessions have been turned to webinars. So we're also just getting used to it. So thank you for your patience as we sort out some of these different settings. And we're really excited to see you all. So I'm going to go ahead and present my screen. Great. Okay, and if there's anyone who needs sign language interpretation, or if there's any ASL interpreters here, please send us a message and we'll make sure to add you so that people can see your video. If you need to access this slide, the URL is here, is tinyurl.com DDD PLE 2020. Okay, so here are our SFUSD norms. You might have seen them before. We want to have a real focus on equity at the center, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Be part of the solution and be present. And I'm thinking about this in terms of our meeting today, but also in terms of how we are with students. I also want to mention, because this is a webinar, your options will look a little bit different at the bottom of your screen. So there is a chat, but the chat will be comments directly to me and Devora. If you have a question, please use the Q&A, and that way, when we answer it, everyone can see the answer, since everyone might have a similar question. Okay, so what does technology mean for educational equity? We talk a lot about equity of access and opportunity, and equity of access and opportunity are the biggest goals of the Department of Technology. And we talk about that in terms of devices a lot. And that is obviously an internet, and that is obviously the first step to make sure everyone who needs one has a device and Wi-Fi. But it really doesn't stop there. We need to make sure that students are all engaged and able to access the tools that they need to make meaning and to have that deeper learning. So I just included this graphic. The engagement is really the next piece. After they have that initial device and Wi-Fi, the engagement will lead them to be empowered and to access the content and end up closing those gaps. And we talk a lot about the equity gap or the achievement gap, but I also think a lot about the engagement gap, because if we can't reach students to start with, then we can't get to any of that deeper learning. And it becomes even more apparent when we're learning at a distance. In the classroom, at least we have them in the room. Sometimes when we can't engage them and hook them in at a distance, they're not even joining the Zoom call, or they're not accessing the assignments. So through all of what we're doing, we're really thinking more about how we engage everyone. And Dr. Matthews talked this morning how it's not a question of skill, it's a question of will. And he talked about that in terms of teachers, but I really think about that in terms of students as well. We have to have them want to join and want to be engaged in this work so that we can teach them and be with them. So with that in mind, I wanted to share two friends of mine here, Marlon and Marlon. And these are two students who I had a few years ago who as fifth graders, and they were students who struggled a lot in the traditional classroom setting. They often didn't want to participate in work, were often in arguments with each other and with other students, and they weren't really able to access the content because they weren't hooked in, it didn't speak to them. And we did this project on Spark where they got to make up a fantasy story. Everyone did this project in partners. And it was amazing to see these students come alive. And I'm sure this has happened to many of you as well. When you introduce these tools that allow for creativity and choice and collaboration, the engagement is increased. And that gets to our goal of equity. So when we can find new ways to reach students, then we can reach them all, and we can get to that each and every student. And it was really exciting to see these students create and to have their voices come alive. So I'll just show you a little bit of their project. They took pictures and told a whole fantasy story that they invented, and it was amazing. And I'll just let you listen to their voices for a moment here. This is Marlon.
I am happy for Retrailer because we get the special opportunity to do this, that other people, and because me and my partner work so hard for this trailer, and we do this for fun because it's really fun to make a trailer.
So I just wanted to bring the student voice into this conversation, and it really drives all of my work, and I know all of our work in how we're thinking about students and how they're experiencing this new kind of education when we're at a distance, and how we really value their identity so we can have that equity piece top of mind with all of our instruction. So here's what we'll achieve today. We're going to spend most of the time understanding the mindsets of personalized learning. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the personalized learning environments pilot program that we have in the district. And so those mindsets, I think, can be really powerful and apply to all kinds of different learning. And I'm going to talk specifically about how it applies to distance learning. And then we'll spend a little bit of time starting to explore strategies for increasing virtual engagement and exploring some recommendations for home learning spaces. And I'll share those resources with you so you can explore in depth a little bit more. But like I said, we'll spend most of our time thinking about the mindsets, thinking about those as the building blocks for how we think about instruction and engaging students. So here's kind of my driving question. What are the personalized learning environments, and how can I create a collaborative classroom environment online? So the personalized learning environments playbook is our website, and Deborah will be putting things into the chat so you can access them more easily as well. But this is a pilot program that we've had for the last 3 years with 14 elementary schools in the district. And there are several resources there. And I'll just share it on my screen as well, that you can explore, especially under resources and research, to learn a little bit more about that program. But I want to emphasize that these schools have gone a little deeper into that program, but a lot of the research and the mindsets and what we're doing really apply to all teachers and to all schools, and which is why I'm kind of sharing all of this with you today. The schools that were part of this program received technology for students and received flexible furniture for students in their classrooms. And now things are a little different, obviously, when we're teaching at a distance, and we're all depending on technology in a new way. And many of the things that we've been exploring in this program, I think, will really relate to all of us as we're teaching with technology now. Sorry, while that loads for a minute. Okay, here we go. So we're thinking about technology and flexible learning spaces in this pilot, as I mentioned, but physical materials alone aren't going to shift our practice, which is why I want to take us into thinking about our mindsets as educators and how we're supporting students with these mindsets. And all of this really also connects to the graduate profile when we're thinking about engaging students and tapping into their identities and their creativity and making it applicable to real life and career. All of that is really connected with what SFUSD is striving for with the graduate profile. And I really think that distance learning is a great opportunity for us to kind of revisit a lot of these ideas in the graduate profile and think about how it connects to our daily instruction. So I'm going to play a short part of this video. This is some of our personalized learning environments teachers talking about how their work connects to the graduate profile.
Personalized learning has helped my students build the graduate profile skills of creativity and content knowledge.
Personalized learning has benefited many of my students. PLE has really helped me to see that students learn in different ways, and that the traditional way isn't for all the students.
I finally feel like I am more of a facilitator of student learning than the person that has knowledge that wants you to kind of just repeat what I'm saying or complete a work to give it back to me.
I'm owning my teaching competence a little bit better and knowing what works developmentally, but also working with families. Right when we were getting that group, COVID-19 came. What do we do to really engage students and families, and how am I going to flip it so that everyone is equitably being taught?
So that connects a little bit personalized learning together with the graduate profile. And I do think it is very connected. It's also connected to these ideas of moving from traditional learning environments to this 21st century learning, thinking about how we're being collaborative and using technology, and thinking about how we do that at a distance is new as well. So it's a real opportunity to rethink how we're doing a lot of these things. So to get into the mindsets for personalized learning. So when we started this program, we had these mindsets in mind for learning in the classroom. And this summer, we've expanded that to think about how do these mindsets apply to a virtual environment, because obviously it is a little bit different. But each of these, equity agency, addition by subtraction, process over product, and push versus pull, think about ways that we can get to that engagement and identity and equity and really make that deeper learning come alive for students. So we're starting with addition by subtraction. These are 3 ideas, and I just want to say too that these ideas were developed in collaboration with our other personalized learning environments experts. So we've been working with the design consultant Rebecca Hare, who is an expert on spaces and flexible learning, and also with assistant superintendent Aliva Hughes Gibson and principal Ben Klaus. And so we came up with these ideas to help guide our instruction. So selecting a few digital tools, just the way we would unclutter our physical environment, we want to unclutter our digital environment, and create simple checklists or schedules for students to follow that are repeatable each day, and keep our current learning platform focused on that learning so that it's not overwhelming or confusing for families. So here's a few examples of that. I'm going to try to talk a little bit louder. I'm getting the feedback that it's a little quiet. I'll just try to speak up and see if that solves a problem. Thanks for that feedback. So great. So it sounds like that's better. So for addition by subtraction, we know that for our early elementary, kindergarten through 2nd grade, Seesaw is our main platform. And for 3rd through 5th and up, 3rd and up, Google Classroom is our main platform. And I also have seen many teachers use Google Slides and Google Docs as templates. And I just want to emphasize that having that single main platform is really important for students and families to be able to follow along with the work and not spend so much time figuring out where they have to go each day, which link they have to click on. So if we can have that all in one place for everyone, that can be a real advantage. So here's a few examples of that on the left here, and I'll just go to a bigger copy of this as well. This could be an example of a Google Slides template that could be used daily. So this would be a 1st grade, and it's not filled in here, but you could have your morning meeting, your phonics, your writing, and have that familiar format every day for students so that they know what to do and they can have more agency and independence in their learning to make them more engaged and more successful. And here's another one from some colleagues who are part of the personalized learning environments at Tenderloin. That was Miss Park, Miss Fitzgerald made these great slides. And again, it's a template that can be used every day, but swapped out with new content so that students get familiar with this format and know where to look and find their assignments every day. And I've also linked in some great websites from Flynn and from Carver. The kindergartners use the site. And so it could be Google Sites as well. That's your main platform. So, so they made this great site that has, again, a single place for students and families to find information that's going to be relevant to them. And so they don't have to go hunting for it every day and get lost. And that is feedback that, that you may have encountered, and we got from a lot of families in the spring, that it was overwhelming, the number of links on the different platforms, and they don't know where to go. So that addition by subtraction is really key for helping all of our students be successful. And especially when we think about our families that might have less experience with technology and different tools, we want to support them as best we can. Here's some more specific examples within Seesaw and within Google Classroom. Not only do we want to pick a single platform, we want to keep that platform uncluttered. So I've just circled here next to an activity, you can archive it. And in Google Classroom, you can really organize this classwork by creating your own categories. And one thing that we found useful in my work at Chavez last year was organizing categories even by day or by week so that it's very, very clear to students, here's what you need to do today. And these assignments can even be dragged from one day to the next. So that can be a nice way to keep that environment uncluttered and focused so that students can get into their learning more quickly and go more deeply. And similarly, in Clever, our students are signing into Clever, and all teachers have their own teacher page in Clever, so that you can customize that experience to only put the links to the apps and the websites that are going to be most relevant for your students. And if you want to go deeper into any of these topics, Google Classroom, Seesaw, Clever, we, the Department of Technology and Digital Learning team, have further webinars on those. They're recorded or live, so I really recommend diving into those more if you want to learn more about any of those tools. The next mindset that I wanted to go over is equity and agency. So we want to build our independent learners, and that's very connected to what I was just talking about with our schedules and repeating the same tools, so that we're not kind of caught up in which tool it is and relearning that part of it. And that open communication with the families is so important. So being able to continue to think of the families as the first teacher, especially with our very youngest students. Think about how we're supporting the families so that students can access materials, and not being dependent on that even being all online, but finding whatever way we can to connect with families and making sure that they feel supported. And the last part of this equity and agency is about choice. So when we're thinking about any assignment that we're giving to students, how can we incorporate choice so that they feel like they can choose what works best for them, and they can build those metacognitive skills so they're developing as self-reflective learners, but also so that they can feel engaged and happy and joyful and able to choose something that really connects to their own interests. So here are a couple of examples of how you might do that. Having frequent opportunities for families and students to give feedback. So that might be an online survey that goes home. It might be a text that you send to families. I know that a lot of our families communicated best via text messages, and that was effective. Or it might be phone calls. Another suggestion that came from one teacher is having a weekly Zoom chat, not just for our students, but for our families, so that there's a time for families to connect with you and to connect with each other, to share ideas and build that community that we love, that we gain from being at schools, that we have to reinvent now that we're online. So how can we create spaces not only for students to collaborate and build community, but for families to do that? Leverage things like room parents or parent volunteers so that they can host some of those chats, or they can do a phone tree or whatever communication works for your families. And one thing that happened in my family, actually, for my son, is his teachers sent a weekly list of learning objectives and topics that were in parent-friendly language. So I knew for the week, this is what's happening in reading, or this is what's happening in math. And I, as a parent, found that very useful, just to have that overview so that I can really be a co-teacher at home and supporting the work that teachers are doing. And then lastly, this idea of building in choice to every activity. And it's not something that we always think of when we're designing instruction, is how can there be choices all the time? So Seesaw is a great tool for that. And now that the district has purchased Seesaw for K through 12. So Seesaw is not just a tool for our youngest learners, but it can be a way for all students to express themselves differently. So Seesaw, built into the tool, has options for taking photos, doing drawings, taking videos, and recording one's voice. So that can be a great way to just have students express themselves, to give them a prompt or a question so that they can explore, and then students can share those with each other and have that kind of freedom, expression, and creativity that I was showing with my friends Marlon and Marlon in the beginning of the slides, about how that really got them engaged and got them to participate in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise if we had just told them to write their story on paper. Another thing I've seen happen in some classrooms, in a first and second grade classroom, is having students vote on things. So even very simple things like, tomorrow, should I read aloud this book or this book? And it really changes their engagement and their investment when they feel like they're participating in the learning and getting to choose things. Or choosing a project focus, like having a passion project that students could explore, or a research project, or a theme, where students get to really think about what they love and feel like that's represented in their learning and in their classroom. Similar to what our keynote speaker was saying, Dina Simmons, this morning, about representation in the learning and feeling seen and feeling like you are important is such an important part of equity and engagement, so that we can have all students participate. Our next mindset here is push versus pull. So this is something that we want to emphasize in terms of synchronous versus asynchronous time. So when I talk about synchronous time, I'm talking about that, mainly that, now that we're at a distance, mainly that video chat time, or time that you are with students. And thinking about that time, maximizing it that you are together. So maximizing that togetherness and using it for connecting and collaborating and making meaning together, giving feedback to each other. So doing the things that you need to do together, and making sure you spend that time to learn about each other. And so students can develop that sense of community, especially starting a new year at a distance. We want to really focus on ways to build that community, and think about all the things, all the other things, all the direct instruction, pushing new content, even the reflection and some of the feedback can happen when you're not all together. So asynchronously on a tool, so in Google Classroom or in Seesaw or somewhere else, or you can make videos to share that information, so that precious synchronous time is used to hear everyone's voice and to value everyone's identity, bringing all your students together. And then thinking about designing our learning experiences from student interests and backgrounds. So spending time right up front to learn and continue learning about what drives students' interest the most. Again, getting back to that engagement. So keeping engagement at the center of all that we do, and keep coming back to it, so that if we're not reaching students, how can we hook them back in? What are they interested in that will bring them back in, so that we're not losing them? So here's a couple of more specific examples around that. So having your video chats include community building games and sharing, recording videos ahead of time, and other kinds of direct instruction using tools like Screencastify, or posting things on YouTube so students can access. And that can also be really valuable in terms of knowing that all of our families are different, and they might have different schedules, different responsibilities. And so allowing them that flexibility in when they access that information can be really helpful for a lot of families. Making sure that our assignments and projects are considering students' identity and culture. And that means that we have to ask them and gather their feedback and gather their input. So even developing some of our first assignments around that. Choosing our read alouds that reflect our students' culture, and leveraging home materials. So I have two examples here on the bottom. This example on the left is a Seesaw post at the beginning of the year that we did actually last year for some fourth graders, where they just did a simple self-portrait and talked about things they were good at and wanted to get better at. And you can do that in many different ways, but the more we can ask students to reflect on themselves and to share that with the teacher and with the rest of their classmates, the stronger our community can be, and the more we can connect with students and really reach them as we design our future instruction. And then on the right here is actually my son building something. This was one of his assignments in the spring when they were doing distance learning. And so that's just another way that we can use hands-on learning to share what we're interested in. So you can see he has a little mini soccer ball there as part of his design, and he loves soccer. And so giving opportunities for students to use home materials to do things like build something and share it with the class, or even during a Zoom chat, having a scavenger hunt and go find something in your home that you want to share. Those kinds of prompts, even though they seem like small things, can really help our students feel connected and really help us get to know each other. The next mindset here is process over product. So showing the learning experience to our learners, so especially now that we're not in class with them and able to remind them and say, okay, we're doing this next, this is what we're doing, having some materials to really make that clear to students. So visually and through our organization, like I was talking about in Google Classroom and Seesaw, making it really clear what they're doing and when. Giving opportunities for learners to be reflective throughout that experience, and not only focusing on the final product, but really having opportunities for that in progress work to gather that feedback along the way. So here's some examples of how you might do those things. So like I said, like having a visual of a project that you're doing, so that students know this is what we're doing each day, this is what we're doing week by week, and keeping that available in whatever system you're using, whether you're using Google Slides or a Google Site or Google Classroom, keeping that information available to students. One thing that the district is developing that you'll find out more about is interactive journals, and doing that online can be a great way to connect with students and hear their thinking and their voice. So science journals or writing journals. So the science department and the language arts department are developing some templates around that so that you can do interactive journaling. Seesaw is also a great tool for that. Students can narrate their thinking process. So built in with anything that you submit on Seesaw, students can record their voice. So this can be a great tool for students at any age to share their reflections, share what they're thinking, share how they solved a problem, and it can really give a lot of insight into us as teachers to how to support that student more. And lastly here, using peer feedback. So Seesaw is a great tool for feedback and sharing work in progress. And again, text or voice can be used. And I just linked in a few examples of feedback frames and show here on the bottom, this is the Seesaw post. Students or teachers can give feedback right underneath the post of another student. And that's a great way for students asynchronously to be connected with each other, giving each other feedback. And going back to my own son, when we did that in the spring, it was just, as a parent, just he was so excited to see feedback from his peers, and it was more motivating than just about anything to like have that excitement shared by his peers for him to see what their work and for them to comment on his work. So I just want to really encourage you to think about ways, either with Seesaw or with another tool that you choose, to incorporate that feedback and peer-to-peer communication. So now I am going to, this is a little bit of a new tool for me, so bear with me. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, and I'm going to ask for your feedback on, let's see. Sorry about this. I'm just trying to go to my second poll here. This was the old poll. Sorry about a little technical difficulty. I have a second poll here that I'm just trying to access. Okay, here we go. So I just want to ask you, looking back at those mindsets, addition by subtraction, equity and agency, push versus pull, and process over product, what mindset are you most interested in focusing on in your practice? Where do you want to kind of focus your attention? And while we do that, Devorah, if there's any questions popping up that you wanted to voice right now, otherwise we'll also have questions at the end.
There was a lot of questions in the Q&A, a lot about, Zareen, how Seesaw and Google can work together. So maybe you could touch base on that.
Sure.
And then also, let's see. Oh, Whitney is asking what tools Zareen is using to make these polls, and that is Zoom. Zoom actually has a polling feature that you can use. And Carol, if you're not able to see the poll, it might, if you're using two screens, that might be why, or it could be behind some things. I would close some open applications.
Great, thank you. So I'll talk a little bit, more about Seesaw and Google Classroom.
And then, I'm sorry, Zareen. And the other thing is, age group of Seesaw and like, if you can use it for older students and how that would look.
Sure, great. I will go over that. Thanks for that feedback. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen again. Okay, so first of all, thinking about Google Classroom and Seesaw. So both you can use at all ages, really, and I'll tell you how they might differ at different ages. So if we're starting with our youngest students, our pre-K through second graders, we recommend that if you use Google Classroom, think about it more as a parent communication tool, because it's not, those youngest students won't be able to use Google Classroom independently. So the district has talked about Seesaw as being the main platform for pre-K through second grade because students can use it independently. When we talk about third grade and up, the district has recommended that Google Classroom is the main platform because it has more involved organization. You can have more assignments. You can put them in categories. There's grading features. So it's a great tool. Once students can navigate and read more text and use that navigation, it can be a really nice tool because it has more complex ability to organize. For the older students, and really for all students, Seesaw is a really great tool for making thinking visible. So at all ages, students can show their thinking by recording their voice. Let me see if I can just show you on my screen Seesaw a little bit, and I'll just wander into the activity library. So within Seesaw, There's a robust activity library that has a lot of different assignments for students that you can leverage. Just in my administrator account here, 1 second. And again, it can really be at all ages, and it can be a really great tool to answer a question, and students can draw, students can take photos, and they can record voice on everything. So I'll just show you an example. So for example, if I'm at 3rd grade, here are a bunch of activities, grouping animals, doing puzzles, all of these things. Now I might hop up to 10th grade. Oops, nothing found for, oh, I'm in my library, sorry. I'm gonna go into the community. So if I hop up to 10th grade, I see some other kinds of questions that are more complex, summarizing the lesson, reading and reflecting, looking at poetry tools. So really, Seesaw, you can make your own activities, or you can leverage things in the activity library. So it's really not specific to a grade level. And the thing that's great about it, and I'll just show this really quickly, is when students go to post work, they are always given all of these options. So even, you know, yeah, an older student, like a 10th or 11th grader, might choose to draw something or take a photo to respond to a prompt. And they have that, again, that choice is built into the tool so that you can give them a prompt, and it might have a writing component and a visual component, and it's built into the tool. And the voice recording tools are also built in. So not only can students write their response, but they could narrate their thinking behind that. And it just values the written word and the spoken word in a kind of equal way that I find really, really nice for students, and really gets back at our focus on equity and valuing students that might feel more comfortable speaking their ideas, or ones that might feel more comfortable writing or drawing or taking a photo. Yet we're valuing all these different ways of expression and as valid ways to respond to questions. And again, the questions could be anything that's related to your class that's relevant for your classroom. So yeah, so I talked a little bit about age group and the differences between Seesaw and Google Classroom. And I really encourage you to use both, and they really have great functionality for both. And the feedback in Seesaw is really great. How students, it's one of the simplest interfaces that I've seen for students to see each other's work and to comment on it. So it can be a really great way to do a quick share, like I was talking about process over product, thinking about how are you getting feedback in the middle of a project, not just when it's done. And Seesaw can be a really great tool for that, for brainstorming, sharing a couple ideas, having your peers comment on it. The other day I was leading a webinar on Seesaw, and a high school Spanish teacher was talking about how it could be a really great way to practice oral language, and that doesn't just go for a different language, but for our English language development, to really focus on that oral language and how we're giving feedback in the spoken form. And also one other thing, I do really love Seesaw because of all of these reasons. Just hearing each other's voices, I think is something that, you know, I miss hearing the voices of all the students. And so Seesaw is another way. It doesn't only have to be during that synchronous time that we can feel in community with one another and that we can hear each other's voices. Seesaw makes that possible as well. Okay, so moving along here to some virtual engagement strategies. So I've talked about this a lot, but I just want to say it again, that we must think about engagement and joyful learning and connection so that we can reach every student. So, you know, in the spring I saw, unfortunately, you know, as this was very new to us, I saw many students kind of check out, be like, I don't want to do this, or it's not for me, or I don't feel engaged by it. And then I saw in other classrooms when we really did focus on what students' interests and their identity and really focused on that joy in learning, how different that experience was and how those students were reached. And so we started brainstorming on what that could look like in the classroom. And so that's linked in this doc as well. And this is not exhaustive, but it's just a lot of ideas to think about how are we building community, and just many ideas. Most of this is more focused on K through 5, but it doesn't have to be actually. I think many of these ideas could apply to older students as well. So we have these different categories: homeschool connection, and I'm not going to read through all these right now, but I invite you to explore them further and to think about how we're incorporating all of these things. Arts and movement being so important. I think now that we're at a distance and on computers. Sometimes that's being forgotten, and that's one of the ways that many of our students connect the most, when they get to move or act or use music or art. So how can we incorporate that into our instruction? Using brainstorming tools, and I talked about this already, different ways to get student input and sharing our work and give feedback in progress. So I have a lot of information here, and Devorah, actually, who's a moderator on the call right now, is doing a longer session on this afternoon. It is unfortunately already full, but all of these recordings will be available, so I really recommend that you check that out, because she's going to dive a lot more into how you would use some of these strategies in the classroom. Okay, so the next piece I wanted to explore with you all is about home learning spaces. And this was developed in collaboration with Rebecca Hare, who I mentioned earlier. And thinking about creating our home learning space, just the way we would set up our classroom very intentionally and the learning spaces, how can we guide families in setting up their home learning spaces with an orientation towards equity and agency, and thinking about putting the learner in charge. So not only do we want to help our learners be set up for success, we want them to figure out how they can be successful. Even our very youngest learners, we want our kindergartners to think like, I'm not comfortable in this space. I don't feel like I can concentrate in this space. I'm going to go somewhere else. And it doesn't mean you have to have a big space. As you can see right now, I'm in my kids' room right now, and we have to make do with the spaces that we have, but we can still be intentional about how we choose and set up our spaces within the sometimes very limited space that we have. So just, I'll let you read through this a little bit more, but thinking about movement, opportunities to change posture. Number 4, like choosing 2 spaces for each task. So I know this happens in my home a lot, like my kids might need to be in this space and I need another space. So thinking about that ahead of time, where can I be for different reasons in my home, so that it's easy to quickly make that choice. And why would I choose one space over another? And having those conversations with students. And then again, just that choice aspect, how meaningful it is for students to have a choice, whatever the choice is, so that they can feel in control and in charge and feel more engaged and motivated to participate. Hopping down to number 6 here, rituals. Building in just the way we have so much structure and schedule in our daily life. I think it's something that many of our students at home miss a little bit, because our home environments vary so much that they don't always have those same structures and schedules and rituals. So what are the most meaningful rituals that we can build in, and how can we work together with families to do that? And then here's just a second page of this, and these are a little bit more logistical about keeping organized, using what you already have, thinking about noise and light. And again, that identity piece, number 10, make it personal, make it joyful, so that students feel pride and joy in the space where they learn, and they want to be there and they want to participate. This handout on these home learning spaces is linked here, and this has also been printed out for our elementary schools and has been with your packet of technology help. You're getting this printed out in multiple languages for families, so that will go home for any family who picks up that packet of papers at school sites. Okay, so next I would like us to just take a moment to share new ideas that you have from today, any reflections you have, and I'll go ahead and share my screen of that Mentimeter. So you go to menti.com and you type in this code 282778. And as you do that, I think this is going to update here. So I'll just leave a minute for us to do that. And let me know if is that working for people right now? Oh, good, here it comes, great. Thank you for sharing your ideas. Devorah, is there anything, are there any questions bubbling up right now as people fill this out? I know there's a lot of questions.
There's a lot of questions. And I just want to say to everyone, we know we're in the place of like unknown, right? We don't know, we haven't probably gotten much communication from our principals yet. We don't have a solidified MOU. There's a lot of things that are not solidified. But I will tell you this, people have been working all summer long to build you great materials to get started at the first of the week, and those will be coming to you this week. So have some patience for that, and give yourself a moment to just enjoy your last days of summer. And then know that it will all be coming to you, and there is a lot of support for families. There is a lot of support for learning these new tools. And yeah, because to answer all the questions is, I don't know if that could happen. I think maybe Zareen, to talk a little bit about Seesaw for older students might be a good place to start though.
Yeah, thank you so much, Devorah. And I will also put up my email address at the end of this presentation. And I really invite you to continue asking questions, especially if you had a question that we couldn't get to, since it is a very, very large group today. I appreciate your patience. And thank you for all of your great words here. It's great to see all of your reflections on what we talked about today. So that's going to keep going. So let me talk a little bit more about Seesaw for older students. And I'm going to go back into the activity library. And just for transparency, I have used Seesaw a lot at the elementary level. And I've heard from some teachers at the high school level, but I haven't used it myself at the high school or middle school level. But I do see the opportunity there. So I'm going to go back into 9th grade this time. And so in the activity library in Seesaw, there are some activities like getting started in different subjects for different, for like 9th grade if you go into your grade level. And so that can be a great place to start, just to kind of understand some of the capabilities and how you might use it. So I'm just scrolling down here. And so if I click into some of these activities, you can see students are asked to remember a new concept, to so this one, and I'm just kind of doing this on the fly, so I'm not totally familiar with all these activities, but I think about all the things that you might do in person and even on paper in your classroom, and pretty much all of that can be done on Seesaw. You can give a template as a prompt. Students can draw or write or record voice on top of that, and students can see each other's work. So it can just be a really great tool to take what you might have done, especially something that you want students to see each other's work and they might want feedback on, can be a really good thing to add in Seesaw. It can also be a way to document things that you're doing offline. So if there is something that they've built or created or experimented with, or even a movement or a dance or anything like that, all of that can be documented on Seesaw. So students can take a video of them doing something, or they can take a picture of something they've done on paper or outside. So it is really open-ended in that way. And that's another reason why it's not grade level specific, because the teachers can set the prompts and they can set the templates and they can give the instructions to make it grade level appropriate. Okay, just going to take one more look at this beautiful Mentimeter. So I see engagement is sticking there in the middle, process, collaboration, and choice. I'm so glad to see that those things came through, especially that engagement and choice being so critical as we think about equity and reaching each and every student. Okay, so I'm going to take us back here. And so I just wanted to, before we spend a little bit more time on questions, I wanted to end with two more student voices to kind of really keep them at the center of our thinking. So this was a student, I think it's a first grader, who is talking about the theme that their class voted on. So this is one of the classes, I mentioned this idea earlier, where they were going to embark upon a theme that would encompass their writing and math and other learning they were doing, and they voted on it and agreed that they would have an ocean theme. And then all the kind of excitement and rich learning that happened around that after they kind of chose that as a class.
What I know about the ocean is that the water is salty. I know that some animals live underwater. And here I drew some fishies because they live underwater.
you get a little taste of what Seesaw can do in that example as well, where students can draw, they can type text, and they can record their voice or click on something. So that could be a younger student, it could be an older student, and depends a lot on what prompt you want to give them.
Zareen, can you jump back into Seesaw, please, and just show everyone how they get to that library?
Yes. So as a teacher, you are going to come into Seesaw through clever.sfusd.edu, and that will bring you into your class. When I'm at this page, I can go to the green plus when I'm logged in as a teacher, and I can go to assign activity. And after I click on assign activity, I'm in the activity library. This takes, my default view is my own library. So that's either activities that I have created or ones that I've saved as like favorites. And then there are two more tabs up here at the top, the school and district tab, which is just our San Francisco Unified teachers are in here, and also our curriculum departments are creating a lot of activities for this also. And then the full community library, which is Seesaw ambassadors from all over. So that those are regular teachers who have gone through a little bit of extra training with Seesaw, and anyone can do that. You can do that if you want to learn more about Seesaw. It's called the Seesaw Ambassadors Program. So there's a lot of really, really great lessons in here, and I'm filtered right now to 3rd grade, but I can go back to all. I can filter by grade, by subject, or by keyword. And they have a lot of great ideas here for remote learning and all kinds of different things. I also want to mention that if you like an activity, but you want to change something about it, that is also very easy. So say if I like this All About Me activity, I'm going to put it in my favorites with that heart. You have to do that first, put it in your library, and then you're able to manipulate it a little bit more. So I have that activity in my library now. And then underneath, after I click into this activity, I have these options. Seesaw always has these 3 dots for more options. And from here, I can copy and edit an activity. So that's a really great way that you can take a great idea and then maybe change it for your context, maybe add in something specific to your class, or record your own voice for the teacher instructions. So you can do that if you want to, or you're welcome to also just assign it as is. But it's a really robust tool. It really open-ended. It really gets to a lot of these mindsets that we're talking about in terms of choice and engagement and feedback and collaboration. So yeah, I definitely recommend checking it out. Seesaw, the help area in Seesaw has a lot of great webinars and recorded information. And also we've made a bunch of webinars. I've made some that you can find in our district webinar recordings page as well. So let me play one more Seesaw activity. And this was from a 3rd grade. I think they read the Lorax, and you can hear how students were able to kind of reflect on ideas more and do some kind of deep thinking and around their ideas.
I would protect the world by putting my recyclable things in the recycle, my compostable things in my compost, and my garbage in my landfill. And I would also help the world by not using too much water, especially in California, and not spreading viruses when I have one.
So again, I just love the idea that students can express their own thinking and their own ideas. I think the prompt, I think they read in this 3rd grade class, they read, this is at Clarendon, I believe, I think they read the Lorax, and then students were asked to reflect on what they would do to make the world better. And just having those kind of open-ended responses can really get to some of that critical thinking, and we're valuing students' voice, and then students can learn from each other. And so Seesaw has great capabilities in that sense. This is the end of my kind of official slides. We have a few more minutes, and I know there were a lot of questions. Here are the slides again, and here is my contact information. And I want to really invite you to ask me questions, email me questions, or share with me. If you have great ideas and great activities or formats, we're trying to find more ways to kind of share those best practices amongst ourselves. So I would love to hear about those as well. And I just wanted to say one last thing about this picture here on the right are some of my students from a couple years ago. And these were, again, a bunch of students who often in the principal's office, often not hooked into learning, and finding out what they were interested in made me see a really different side of them. And so it really motivates me. And I have that in the back of my head all the time, is these students who we're not reaching, and why are we not reaching them, and how can we reach them, and what can we do to engage them, especially now that they're not right in front of us, they're at a distance. How can we do all that we can to make sure that we're reaching each and every student?
So we have a couple of questions. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm correct in saying that Menti, you can unless you upgrade Menti, and we're not paying for that as a central district, that it's pretty much anonymous, right? You can't set up a classroom. However, one way that you can work around that is if you give each student a number, they can put their student number and then respond, and then you'll know who's responding. That's just one way to work. We got these freemiums, and we got to work around the best we can. So that's my freemium workaround for you. I hope that helps.
That's a great idea, Devorah. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think we're still exploring how to use these tools and really know who is saying what. That's a great idea.
And then we also have a question from Erica asking about Padlet, and if there is an all-encompassing form for parent consent on all apps for the school year. And I believe that is going to be in the digital handbook, but I was wondering if you knew.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head either, but Erica, feel free to email us, and I think we will have something coming out in our handbook as well.
I would also check in with your principal.
What else is coming up in the questions?
People are wondering how to access Seesaw as a teacher. And I think it's just important to note that Seesaw is a paid application through the central office this year. So it's very different than how it's worked in the past. So through Clever, basically think of Synergies over here with your class list. And then from Synergy, everything is getting pushed into Clever to fill it out with your students. And then you have all of these, the paid apps have your classes set up already. So Seesaw is one of those apps. So your class set is all set up. You just go through Clever.
Exactly. And so we want everyone to go through clever.sfusd.edu, teachers and students. That is a way you can access it. And it's so great that the district has purchased it now, because that means that the rostering is all set up for you. When you log in as a teacher, if you have your own classroom, you'll see your classes already there, your students are already there. And students, the same thing, log in through clever.sfusd.edu, go to Seesaw, and they'll come to your class. So it's really streamlined for students and teachers. And I think I saw a question come through about what about specialists and other people at school. So we are working right now to make sure that everyone has access. So what's probably going to happen is, so admins, principals, and assistant principals already have access to all Seesaw classes at a school. And we're looking to add other coaches like the IRF and the Lit coach and other coaches. And then if you're an interventionist that just helps in a few classes, you can also be added as a co-teacher in a class. So if you work with all the first grade teachers, the first grade teachers could add you as a co-teacher to their Seesaw classes, if that helps. Or if you want your own class, you can also create a class after you log in through Clever. And again, we'll have more webinars and information about Seesaw coming up. So please keep an eye on our kind of webinar updates for the district. And that'll be a great resource for you for Seesaw and for other tools.
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember that co-teacher and working with the homeroom teacher, because again, it's from Synergy to Clever to the teacher. And so for all of us TSAs out there and para-educators and specialists, it's important to work with that teacher to get set up as the co-teacher.
I see another question that has come up a lot, so I just want to mention it. It says, can a Seesaw post be sent through Google Classroom assignment? And unfortunately, the answer is no. They don't have that tight integration yet. So from Google Classroom, if you want to direct kids to Seesaw, you're just going to have to direct them to Clever. Say, log into Seesaw and go to your activities tab, and it'll be there. You can't link directly into an activity yet. I've heard that they might be adding that, I hope, but not yet.
And then there's another question here from Sandy Ma. Would you suggest teachers to create one Seesaw classroom for one subject and create one class for all subjects?
Good question. I think for the elementary level, I would suggest that you just have one classroom for everyone. If we're talking about older students, I would think that since they often have different teachers also, that would make sense to have a different Seesaw class for each subject. So most of the time, I think just having it all together is helpful. And then in your activities as a teacher, you can organize folders in Seesaw. So you can have like your language arts folder and your math folder to have assignments per subject within a class. Unfortunately, that isn't student facing, so students don't see it broken up that way. So again, that goes back to our kind of addition by subtraction, thinking really carefully about how you're organizing things. Another thing I should say is that you can schedule assignments to launch at a different time. So you can launch activities for the day that morning if you want to just keep it kind of clean, or activities for the week within Seesaw.
And a bunch of people are saying that went to the Seesaw session this morning that starting August 14th, that activity link is going to be connected. So this is one of the reasons we love Seesaw, you guys, and love them dearly, is because the ask that we have put on them this summer has been great, but they've really come through, and they really have partnered with us to make sure that the experience for teachers and students is seamless. As you can see that they're now going to make a link to Google Classroom. Woohoo!
It's going to be great. I'm so excited to hear that. That's so soon. I didn't know it was happening that soon. Thank you for sharing that with the group.
So, and we have a couple questions coming in about Clever. I'm going to be cognizant of our time. There's 2 minutes left. Yeah. But Clever, if you go to clever.sfusd.edu, right? Or am I have it backwards?
Yeah, clever.sfusd.edu.
Log in with your Google credentials that you would like to get into your SFUSD email, and you'll see all the applications there for you as a teacher. You also have what's called a teacher page. There is going to be some sessions on Clever. If you don't know it well, also you can watch a recorded webinar on Clever as well. I'm going to put the webinar links over here into the chat box, and we highly recommend that you do your own Choose Your Adventure training this week. What you need, it should be there for you.
I'm going to answer one other question here, and then I think we'll probably have to wrap up just about Google Classroom and Seesaw, because I know that it is a little confusing, and we don't want to confuse families either. So I really think about, like, at our lower grades, we want to keep it as simple as possible, pre-K through 2nd grade. I'd recommend probably just Seesaw, and that's your main platform. And then for the upper grades, it's kind of similarly, Google Classroom is your main platform. That's where you're posting your schedules, your daily assignments. And then sometimes one of those assignments, you will assign them to Seesaw, just the way sometimes an assignment might have them go to Newsela and read an article. It's like an addition that might be one of your assignments, because Seesaw is very good for feedback and for recording voice and doing some of those things that you can't do directly in Google very easily. So that's how I would recommend using that. But I appreciate the questions about, like, how do we keep that clear? So trying to be clear about what's your main platform, and then if you have additional assignments, why, and keeping that really clear also. Okay, on that note, I think we'll wrap up here. It is time. I want to thank you so much for coming and helping us figure out this webinar functionality, which is new for Devorah and I also. I'm sorry I can't see all your faces, but I really enjoyed hearing your comments and hope to hear from you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely day. Hope Digital District Day is awesome for you all.
Thank you so much, Devorah, for all the moderation.
Oh, thanks, Reen. Bye.
Talk to you soon. I'm going to end it now. Bye-bye.